So from the 37, Walker, this time it's wide left. St. Arnaud all the way back to the end line. He's going to come out of the near side of the end zone here. Gets out across the 10, up across the 20, up across the 30, near sideline down to the 45. Makes a move at the 40, 30, 20, 10, 5. Touchdown, Ian St. Arnaud. No flags. And the second time this afternoon, the York Lions miss a field goal. Ian St. Arnaud returns it for a touchdown.
Welcome in. Welcome back. It is the OUA recap show here with CF Perspective. Connor O'Neill, Wade Zanketta. We got, I don't know, Connor, our marquee matchups seem to deliver. Each week we've picked them out. And 2 of the 3 weeks we've had Laurier. This upcoming week, spoiler alert, rematch of the Yates Cup. So we're going to have 3 out of 4 games involving the Laurier Golden Hawks. I promise you, there will be other teams involved in the marquee matchups. But when you open the season against a team like Mac, that's usually a big game. You play a team like Guelph that has arguably one of the best storylines, right? Like the Aboud-McRae storyline. It has to be tops in the OUA. Yep. And then you get a rematch of the championship game last year. Connor, they deliver. And we're going to start with this Laurier game against Guelph. But initial thoughts as we get going?
First off, this was an electric game. This was a super exciting football game. I think OUA fans got an absolute treat with this one. But this one came down to the absolute wire. This was a tight football game, tightly contested on both sides of the ball. But the interesting thing about this one, Wade, off the top for me, listen to how close this scoring line was and what it came down to. So I'm going to start in the fourth and work my way backwards. 3-3 for each team in the fourth quarter. So it's 6 points for six points total in that quarter. Then it goes 7-7. So we have a game that's tied up at 10 there, working our way backwards. Then it goes 14-14. This game is still tied, working our way backwards, going into the first quarter. But here's the difference. Laurier blanks Guelph in the first quarter, 9-0 Laurier. But other than that, 14-7-3. Ties across the board in the box score at the end of this one. Really tight ball game. Laurier, Guelph both looked really, really good in this one.
Yeah, and Connor, this one, even late into that first quarter, it was tight. And it seemed like every time Taylor Elgersma made an error, the next time he touched the field, he corrected himself and got his team back into that winning position that they like to play in. But to me, this game started and ended when one man, the jitterbug, the electric running back, Mr. Tayshaun Jackson, decided, you know what? Right before the half, Guelph puts together a nice scoring drive. Game's a 2-point game. And they kick the ball off. And Tayshaun Jackson says, hold up. We're not going to halftime yet. I need this one. And he goes 108 yards. I thought it was 109 because when he caught it, he kind of did a check step to make sure he had the ball. But he took off. And Connor, we saw this in week 1 against Mac, and I said it out loud when we did our recap show. I'm like, this guy is nice, and he's going to pop one. I thought he almost was against Mac. He does here against Guelph, and it turned the tide, right? Because they come out of the half, Guelph puts up a touchdown halfway through the third quarter, and had they not scored that Tayshaun Jackson kick return, Guelph's probably in the lead right there. And this game is much closer than the 9 points we saw in the end.
Yeah, you say this turned the tide, and it really did, because to go back even further on this one, this Jackson touchdown comes off the heels of a Tessier 29-yard touchdown pass from Tristan Aboud to make this game 16-14 in favor of Laurier. So without this kickoff return touchdown for the Golden Hawks, you're right, this turns into a Tristan Aboud 3-yard touchdown run midway through the third quarter, and now Guelph's up in this ball game. So this was a huge moment for Laurier. But I think in the second half, the run game really took over, especially in the third quarter for Laurier for me in this one. On the scoring drive, the 10-play, 70-yard scoring drive for Laurier, it was all Nelms. It was all Elgersma. It was all legs, save for one very nice shot that they took to set themselves up for that 1-yard score for Elgersma. But the third quarter, the run game for Laurier really, really took over for me.
Yeah, and we talked to Taylor Elgersma last week, of course, but off air, we kind of said to him, like, okay, now that we're not recording, how are you guys looking to attack this team? And he said, we're going to attack them the same way we attack everyone, run first. And you saw them really wear on it. And early in the game, it might not work, and you might be sitting there as a fan saying, why are we running the damn ball with all these receivers? But late in the game, that's when it pays off, and it always does for Laurier. And Tanner Nelms, I know they lost Avery Scott, and they said in the broadcast it was an eligibility issue. Tanner Nelms to me is such a nice runner. He's such a smooth, like track athlete style runner that when you play this power scheme, Connor, the ability to go from 0 to 60 for him, it takes so little effort that he can sit there and wait for the pull to develop and wait for the blocker to, declare which way he's going. Is he getting spilled outside, or are they going to frame it? I think Tanner just kind of has the ability to wait patiently and then say, okay, downhill we go. And, he makes some nice catches in the pass game too to keep you honest. But really impressed with Laurier. I don't think it's a surprise that we're impressed with Laurier at this point in the season. But this week's their Western week. They've got to deal with that big monster in front of them. And I think Laurier's in a very comfortable position here at 2-0.
Yeah, I do too. You're coming off two really big wins. You're coming off a win here against a really darn good Guelph football team. I think you can go into that Western game a little bit confident if you're Laurier. But this is a topic we got to save for the preview. We are still recapping, so I think we got to move on. Close the chapter. Laurier, Guelph here. Where do you want to go? There was some really good ball games across the country.
Let's just go right to Western. We're already talking about them. We might as well continue. I mean, their offensive line continued. Keon Edwards continued.
They certainly did.
Obviously not the yardage output that Western is used to from each of these backs. I say that facetiously. They had 200 yards rushing, but usually Keon's in triple figures and Yazbek is close. But Connor, this week it was, good games yardage wise, but 3 touchdowns from Keon Edwards. To me, this game came down to Carlton made some self-inflicted errors early, and it started on the opening kickoff. Then they touched the ball, and their first or second offensive play from scrimmage was a turnover. And it just kind of seemed like they put themselves in such a big hole before they even got a chance to go that the game was over essentially right away.
Yeah, I mean, midway through the second quarter in this one, it was really a 7-point ball game. But you're right, it comes down to some self-inflicted errors. I think Carlton did what no football team wants to do in losing the turnover battle. They had 4 turnovers in this one. They lost a couple fumbles and had the interception. They had the sack against it as well. Your point about the self-inflicted wounds thing, I think is huge in this one. But I do think that Western does as Western does, and their run game really took over. Their offensive line play dominated up front. And, we're sitting here saying, oh, Keon didn't go for like 100 and whatever, but he still averaged 5 yards a carry and had 75 yards, 3 touchdowns. Yazbek himself over 5.5 or around 5.5 a carry, had 66 yards in the touchdown on the ground. Dolby again, 34 yards and averaged, 6.8 on the ground. So they were still able to move the ball really, really well as a team. And I think that's where their strength lies. But certainly Evan Hillock proved his strength in his arm is still very much at play. Goes 16 of 23, 241. Seth Robertson had himself a darn day, going for basically 120 and 2 touchdowns. And I think he was the star of the show here in the pass game, certainly. Obviously, I should say, for the Western Mustangs, had a really good ball game, came down with 2 really, really nice catches, especially that 39-yarder, man. He made a pretty nice play on that ball.
Yeah, and I kind of, you're talking about Seth Robertson here making some plays, but I'll go to the other side and talk about Elijah Barnes. And I mean, this is a kid that everyone knows him as the guy that made the U Sports rosters on NCAA 25 or college football 25. But
Shout
Connor,
out to before we move on, shout out to him for doing that, by the way, because that's amazing. I love those, man.
but we knew when he committed to Carlton that it was going to be a big time recruit, and obviously last year he didn't play, and this year they had Lefebvre ready to rock, but injuries happen, things occur. But I think all the credit to him, and he throws for 275. Of course, the one interception, but he has a really strong game, just controlling it and trying to pull his team back. He made plays when he could. And Connor, this was a 7 point game at one point. Like he pulled them back in, and then they had the punt fumble by Offman Brom, and the very next play from midfield, Seth Robertson put one in. So it went from wow, this is a 7 point game. Carlton's going to get the ball pretty close to scoring range for Forcier. And all of a sudden it went, oh, never mind. Western's back up 14, and this is the end of the half, pretty much. Like I that was the turning point, but I think Elijah Barnes, I've been thoroughly impressed. And do we say best quarterback in the nation's capital at U Sports right now? I mean, Lefebvre's hurt, so that would be his other competition, but I'm pretty confident that he's playing the best football out of the four U Sports quarterbacks that we've seen suit up out of the two Ottawa schools. He's playing the best damn football.
He's playing some pretty good ball. But speaking of Ottawa schools, I'm going to keep this Capital Region related and move on. The Ottawa GGs taking on the Waterloo Warriors in a game that was dominated by Charles Asselin and the Ottawa run game and their defense making some plays in this one. Waterloo offensively struggled to find some output in this one, weren't able to kind of get around the end zone and score. Whereas Ottawa in this one, we talked about Charles Asselin and, receiving, he had 78 yards through the air. On the ground, he had 184 and a touchdown. So he really was the driving force behind this Ottawa offense, but it was Cumberbatch on the defensive side of the ball.
Connor. He is not the driving force. He is the entirety of the Ottawa GG's offense. 32 touches, Connor, went to Charles Asselin. He is so talented, and we talk about this each year, it seems, each week now, that he's gotten the bulk of the carries. But Connor, this is a Charles Asselin show. I am here for it, but without him, this defense would have had an all-timer put to waste.
Yeah, man. Yeah, they certainly had themselves a good day. I was about to mention Eric Cumberbatch there. He had a very damn good day. The sack, the fumble recovery for the touchdown. He had a pass breakup, added 4 tackles on the day. Ottawa's defense pressured very well in this one. Nick Orr was very uncomfortable in the pocket, forced to make some decisions I'm sure he would like back. But I'm really impressed with what the Ottawa defensive group was able to do in this one.
Yeah, and I mean, you get Tolu Ahmed back, and you can slide TK up to safety like we saw this game, his first one of the year at that spot. You get the Cumberbatch brothers out on the side, and then Denny Ferdinand at corner. Connor, I think as good of an athlete as he is, him being at that field corner spot kind of allows him to use his athleticism and roam around and make plays on balls that aren't going to be as flat coming in on a trajectory wise. But having TK up top, your best playmaker, like that to me unlocks a different aspect for this defense. And Nick Orr certainly struggled, below 50% completions, 155 total yards passing. He had to do it on the ground. He didn't really have a whole lot of other options other than running the ball. And I mean, if Ottawa's going to get into a game with anyone running the ball outside of Western, I think they're pretty comfortable just kind of handing it to Charles and saying, win us the game.
Yeah, you talk about Waterloo's ability to run the ball. I want to kind of stay there for a second because I think that really is where their strength lies. I think that's kind of the identity of this team. Nick Orr had himself a day on the ground, had 104. Anthony Miller had a really strong day too, 103 on the ground. So I think that's where their strength lie. And I think as soon as they figure out just kind of how to create offense and develop some offense off of what they're able to do in the ground game, they're going to start to find success. They're going to start to find some offensive output. But I think they really got to start taking advantage of score zone opportunities, whether it's field goals or finding points. You just got to give your offense chances to score, I think, is my big takeaway in this one.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you on that one, Connor. And it's no surprise that these two teams are athletic. They're young. They want to run the football. It's only going to go so far this year, I think, and that's just the reality that teams have to come to grips with as we move into this middle chunk of the season.
Certainly is. It certainly is. But we have two more games to get to, so let's move on. The Queens Gales taking on the
All
York
right.
Lions and Ian St. Arnaud.
Yeah, pause. It is no longer Saint Arnaud. It is Ian Saint, Special Teams Player of the Week. Okay, it is. You know what, Connor? Here's the weird thing. I'm watching the Guelph game, and I'm getting ready to go to Kingston to watch this game live, and I'm like, oh, punt return touch or kickoff return touch. I'm like, wow, that makes our job pretty easy for Special Teams Player of the Week. That was impressive. And then all of a sudden, I'm sitting there, and York's moving the football well at times in the game, and they get to the end of the first quarter and they line up for a field goal, and I'm like, pretty windy day in Kingston. This is going wide right. As you can see, the flags just kind of flying across, and we've played at Richardson and been around Richardson enough to know that if it's windy in outside the stadium, it's gonna be damn near impossible to hit a field goal in that stadium. Sure enough, it squeaks wide right. And the second year corner who I saw at training camp and went, holy, he's fast. All of a sudden he takes it and he cuts across the field. And I'm like, well, he's fast. This has a chance to go
Yeah,
all the way. And he takes the first one back and I'm like, wow, that was impressive.
it's pretty special play.
And then later in the game, he, did the same thing going the opposite way. And
Yeah, third quarter rolls around, and Kingston's one of those cities where you feel like you can never get out of the wind, right? So third quarter comes
well,
around,
it
they're
was
kicking the
opposite,
opposite
right?
direction. I know they're thinking
And
they're
he
out of the
pushed it
wind.
wide left,
You're
and
not. It's Kingston. You are never out of the wind in Kingston. Ian St. Arnaud does what he does, goes 119 again for his second missed field goal return touchdown of the
so
day. Very easily our special teams player of the week.
yeah. So
Very
listen to
easily.
this. He had 9 returns for 312 total yards and 2 touchdowns on the
Two
day.
touchdowns. Not a bad day.
That is his return day in a nutshell. And a lot of it, like towards the end, they weren't really setting up punt returns. They were just kind of like, let's secure it, let's just play it safe. They even put Russell Weird, the third string quarterback, back to return, which I thought he did a fantastic job in terms of controlling the ball. And even when they went to two returners, he would be able to lead block and lay his body out for guys. So I was impressed by
Yeah.
that. But Connor, it was mainly like those two returns and a couple punt returns where they tried to set up a field return.
Mhm.
Ian St. Arnaud is just electric. And this kid's in his second year. He's going to get time over this year returning. And then next year, I think the plan is to kind of get him involved in the defense as a corner in some way. But with that natural speed and ball
Yeah.
skills that he shows in practice and now in games as a returner, like some of the catches were not, elbows tight, catch it, look it in, and go. The wind was playing with the ball until the last second. He had to go over the top for a couple of them on punts, which I was blown away by. So
Mhm.
obviously he's the big story and the big splash plays, but there's a lot that went on in a game that was so one-sided.
We've talked about one already. Should we talk about the other player of the week here? The defensive player of the week, Silas Hubert. 3
Yes.
sacks, 1 TFL, 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery for a touchdown. Ian St. Arnaud was very impressive in special teams. Silas Hubert, very damn impressive on the defensive side of the ball for Queens in this 52-19 win over the York Lions.
Okay. Let's play the game of what ifs. Silas Hubert does not get the lovely fumble from Van Wishart that he scoops up and walks into the end zone. Ian St. Arnaud does not house a 120 full field freaking field goal miss. Connor, York outscored Queens offensively in this first half. And it would have
Yeah.
been 12-10 if we just take away those 2 scores, I know we can't, but if we take away the special teams and defense touchdowns, York's offense played very strong in the first half, and they had their drives, they had their moments where, you might wish that you had moved the ball or maybe made a different throw, but 370 yards of offense.
Mhm.
A lot of it was Alfred Ole and Avante McCoy making different plays.
Yep.
Uh, I think York has to feel confident. I mean, they are playing against a very physical team, and they're not used to that, right? They haven't played the Western, they haven't played the Queens.
Yeah.
Physicality, and for a lot of guys that are new on this roster, whether they're just young players or they're CJ transfers, nobody in the country outside of Laval matches this kind of physicality game in, game out. Nobody. There's not another team, culture, organization, I don't care what you call it. Nobody matches it. And until you see it physically and you feel it, this team is very tough to stop. And Queens didn't really run the ball all that well today or this week, but defensively, the physicality was there. Every hit,
Yeah.
Liam Sutherland was flying into tackles.
Hmm.
Keegan Vanek had a couple big plays. So I think one of the fumbles that York had, it was in the middle of a drive, and all of a sudden the Course Cadden just kind of buckled the guy, and ball just kind of squeaked out, and the York player was down for a considerable amount of time, but ended up returning to play. But Connor, there's a lot I want to get into on Queens on this one, but I think the more important part is York showing that
Yeah.
dogs are going to fight for 60 minutes, no matter how worn down they are. They're going to come after it.
Yeah, man. I think if you're York, there's a lot to be positive about. There's a lot to be optimistic about. I think for OUA fans, there's a lot to be optimistic about with York here. I mean, Matt Lang goes 16 for 34, just under 50%. So maybe we'd like to see that a little bit higher, but he did the best with what he was given with his opportunities in this one. Had 271 through the air, had the touchdown, had the interception, but for the most part, he was hitting his guys. Like Alfred Ole goes for 125 and a touchdown, like you mentioned. Avante McCoy gets involved for 71 yards. He gets Avery Ford in for 33, and he's hitting his other guys for chunk plays here and there too. So I think you're right. I think there's a lot to like with York here. Matt Land played really solid, and I'm really optimistic about this York Lions team. They're building something that I think can be competitive here. I really really like what I'm seeing.
Yeah, and
With that,
I'll briefly mention the Queen side before we move to the final game here. But um, in a run heavy approach, obviously they knew York was going to have to sell out for that, and the corners dictating coverage in that Greg Knox scheme was very evident. I mean, they were bailing out hard and fast in the waggle and in that pre-snap motion. And Queens took advantage. A lot of like fly and dies when they were in hold coverage, a lot of deep outs, a lot of quick slants. Oh, we're in cut coverage. Okay, well, let's get right into that soft zone that the Habs have vacated. And Falcone and Cuomo had a pretty good day, over 100 yards apiece. But I don't know. The offense left a lot to be desired in the first half. Kind of turned it on and made things a bit of a track meet in that second half. And when you get that defense playing downhill and you get into a track meet, Connor, tough to stop.
yeah, no, it certainly is. It certainly is. But we got one game left to get to in this one, and we'll go through this one quickly because I think there really is one major storyline in this one. Mac taking a 32-3 win over the Toronto Varsity Blues. And for me in this one, as Mac puts up over 400 yards of offense, it's Keegan Hall. He produced most of it, going for 294 and 2 touchdowns through the air. Braden Kelly, though, had himself a day on the ground, 75 yards rushing. But Keegan Hall looked really comfortable passing the ball. Max certainly had a day through the air. Braden Kelly on the ground, helping out, like I mentioned. Mac played well offensively in this one. Things were
Yeah,
clicking.
and I think on the other side, like just to kind of give the Coles notes, week one we saw Toronto run the ball really effectively and stick to that run game against Waterloo. Last week, obviously, they went down early. They couldn't really stick with the run game. Connor, this week, there wasn't really a whole lot of time where they tried to go with the run game. I mean, Nyros had 3 carries, Stoikos 4, O'Donoghue had 4, and Scott Barnett had 3, who's the backup quarterback. Like, I don't know if there's a whole lot of like scheming where it's like, this week we don't really think we can run the ball, so let's just try to get on the outside with jet sweeps and quick screens. But to me, the balance when they played Waterloo was they ran the ball effectively, and then it gave Caleb O'Donoghue time in the pocket to kind of work around. So excited for Mac to get that first win of the year. I think they've played 2 really tough games. Excited to see where they turn to here in the upcoming weeks as their schedule is going to get a bit trickier with Guelph this upcoming week 4.
Yeah, they will have a tough test with Guelph. That's going to be a fun game to keep an eye on. But things are going to get interesting as we close the book on week 3 in the OUA. We are looking forward to week 4. The preview videos will be coming out later this week. Will we have another guest this week? We might not. We had a great interview with Taylor Elgersman last week. That was a lot of fun. So look forward to the previews this week. And as always, if you want to watch these games, OUA.tv is your place for live OUA football, live OUA sports, because not only do you get access to all these great football matchups, you get access to all OUA action, all OUA sports. OUA.tv, it is free to sign up. That does it for us for this recap episode. We will catch you later in the week with the preview.